Hey everyone, and welcome back to another SkillCapped guide. In today's guide, we'll be going over everything you need to know about sound in Valorant. Sound is a crucial part of Valorant because if you can understand how it works, then it can give you the edge over your opponents, leading to kills that will be having the opponents calling you a wall hacker. The information in this guide has been curated by the top Valorant players and coaches who have spent countless hours of research to give you the most effective, up-to-date tips you won't find anywhere else. Remember to click the sub button and the bell icon to keep up to date with the most high-quality Valorant guides. To start, we need to talk about the basic concepts of sound in Valorant. Almost everything you do will make some sort of sound. To see if your character is making sound, look up at the minimap and you will see a white circle outlining your agent. If there isn't a circle here, then your enemies won't be able to hear your agent. Another thing to keep in mind is that now in patch 1.0, you can look at the minimap and see the range that the audio can be heard for actions such as the ability sounds, reloads, and even spike interaction. This sound circle will not only give you information about if you're making sounds or not, but it will also tell you at what range the sounds you're making can be heard. To understand a lot of the concepts in this video, you need to know that the sound circle for footsteps has a radius of 30 meters. This means that whenever someone is closer than 30 meters from you, they will be able to hear any sound that you make. This is generally the size of the sound circle, but the circle can change sizes for some of the abilities. We'll touch more on this later in this guide. One thing that the footstep circle doesn't show is how loud the sound is. There are two basic rules that you can follow though. Our first rule is that the size of the agent can determine how loud their footsteps are. Here's a look at 3 different character sizes and what their footsteps sound like. So as you can see, the larger agent Breach makes much louder footsteps than our small agent Jet. The second rule to keep in mind is that the louder the sound is, the closer the source is. Now that you understand these concepts, we can now move on to specific sounds that can and cannot be heard. Some of the most common sounds that every player makes in Valorant is a result of moving. Movement sounds can range from sprinting to jumping and even landing off high elevation changes. In this section of the guide, we'll be talking about everything you need to know about making sounds while moving in Valorant. When you let players hear you, they're automatically at an advantage because they know where you are. This is especially important when it comes to your footsteps. If you don't want people to hear your footsteps, then you have 2 options: shift walking and crouch walking. Both these techniques will prevent you from making sound. You will notice that there will not be a circle outlining your agent on the minimap whenever you do these. Now let's say that you're put into a game situation where you want to see if an opponent is holding a certain angle. You're going to want to be silent, but if you walk around the corner, you risk giving your opponent a ton of time to react as they will see you first. You could just run out into the open, except this will allow your opponent to hear you coming. Instead of making both these mistakes, you should instead walk up to the corner and then you could wide swing. This does commit you to the fight and forces you to go for the kill. Another option is that you could jiggle peek all the angles. Jiggle peeking is a great option because in Valorant you have to move a decently far distance in order to activate your footstep sounds. This means that if you move a very short distance, your footsteps won't be heard, and this is essentially what jiggle peeking is. Another key part of movement is jumping. Whenever you jump, you will make 2 sounds, one when you jump into the air and then a second when you land. This is important to keep in mind because your opponent will be able to hear you drop down from an elevation change over 3 meters. If an object is barely over 3 meters tall, you are able to crouch off the corner of the object and then release crouch once you are in the air. If you do this correctly, it will allow you to stay quiet while dropping off of this higher object. Although you can't really limit the sound made by landing from high objects in Valorant, you are able to cover up the sound of jumping to them by just holding shift or crouch before you perform the jump. And now onto our final movement topic, and that is bunny hopping. This is a technique that players use to move just as fast as sprinting without making all the footstep sounds. This technique makes it so that opposing players can only hear when the bunny hopping player jumps and lands. This makes tracking the exact location of the player much more difficult than if they were just simply running. Players are able to do this because in Valorant, agents don't make sound while in the air. Although this technique does make a bit of sound, you can still use it to your advantage and catch your opponents off guard. If you're able to master moving quietly in Valorant, you can sneak up behind people and get some pretty easy kills where you can take your time lining up your crosshair and then just wait until your opponent realizes that they're already dead. Moving on to our next section of this guide, we will be talking about weapon sounds in Valorant. There are so many players that get scared to switch weapons whenever they're close to opposing players because they don't want to reveal their location. But what they don't know is that you can actually do this and it doesn't make any sounds to opponents. This is just one of the common misunderstandings that most players have about sounds in Valorant. Right now, there are 3 types of weapons in Valorant. You have your suppressed weapons such as your Ghost or Spectre, you have your unsuppressed weapons such as the Vandal or the Op, and then you have your melee weapon, which is your knife. We will be discussing every sound that any of these weapons can and will make. Starting off, whenever you're shooting an unsuppressed weapon, your shots will be heard all around the map. This can change by using a suppressed weapon. Suppressed weapons are only going to be heard if the opposing player is no more than 90 meters away from you. For both suppressed and unsuppressed weapons, if you reload, you will always make sounds that can be heard within your footstep circle. The same goes for when you drop any weapons. Once you drop your weapon, people that are within 30 meters from the landing zone will be able to hear it land on the ground. So this means that even if players are out of your circle, there's still a chance that they're within 30 meters from the drop spot and they can still hear the sound. Many players, when finding better guns, will drop their weapons to pick up the new one. When they do so, the only sound that is made is the original gun hitting the ground. The weapon that was just picked up will give absolutely no audio cues to the other players. And finally, for all my oppers out there, opposing players will not hear any sounds when you scope into weapons or change the zoom magnification specifically for the op. Moving on to the knife, you have 2 options from where you can be heard from. If you're just knifing the air, then the opposing players will be able to hear you once they're in your footstep circle. But if you're knifing an object such as a wall, the distance changes to 45 meters away. This is 3/4 of a full sound circle. A ton of players like to knife and shoot at the barrier before the round starts, and although this used to make a lot of sound, it changed so that no enemy sounds could be heard before the round even started. This is great because now the other team isn't able to tell which site your team is planning on pushing due to just one person shooting at the barrier. Hopefully, after hearing this section, you now know what not to do in order to reveal your location and give your opponents an advantage in Valorant. Now, let's talk about some sounds that you can find at different locations on each of the maps in Valorant. Starting out, we'll head over to Bind and take a look at the sounds that the teleporters make. Whenever playing Bind, you can constantly hear whenever players use the teleporters, and they seem to be pretty loud. We tested exactly how far a player can hear the teleporters from and found that it's about 1.5 circles. This distance isn't just from the entrance of the teleporter, it's also from the exit. This normally means in order for a player not to hear you rotate through a teleporter, they have to be pinned pretty far back in spawn. Still touching on the teleporter sounds, many players don't know that you're actually able to fake teleports. There are 2 ways to perform a fake teleport. One will use Omen, and then another will require an extra weapon or some sort of utility. Starting with Omen, you're able to fake a teleport by jumping into the air and moving into the teleporter. Before going into the actual teleporter, trigger Omen's teleportability, and by the time you land, you should use the actual teleporter to move to the exit. Then, right after the sound triggers, you will be able to go back outside the teleporter that you just used. The second way that you can fake a teleport is by throwing either your weapon or some sort of ability into the teleporter. This will not make the same sound as a player using the teleporter, but you might be able to confuse some of the beginner players to Valorant. There are so many different sounds that come from the teleporter on Bind, so be sure to listen out for them. Just like how the teleporters are specific to Bind, the map Split has ropes that can make a pretty good amount of sound and can really screw up a flank. These ropes will be able to be heard if a player is inside your step circle. And if you don't know, you can hold shift while going up the ropes to be completely silent. Be sure to remember this the next time you're trying to flank on Split. Our final map specific sound brings us to Ascent. On this map, you can find doors that can be opened and closed. In order to interact with the doors, you need to find the switch and click your interact key. The door will make an audible sound that can be heard within 50 meters from the door. Although these doors can be shut, players are able to fire through them and destroy them. You don't have to worry about the sound of the doors breaking because you will definitely hear the shots firing at the door. Right now, these are the only 3 maps that have specific sounds to them, but on every map, you'll be able to find ult orbs that will make 2 sounds, one when you start collecting and then another once you finish. These ult orbs are circle based, so be careful before grabbing them. Okay, tell me if you've been in this next situation. You're on the defending side and you clear all the opposing players. Now all that's left is to defuse the spike and win the round. The only problem is that you don't know what the multiple beeping sounds mean in Valorant. If you don't understand the beeping, it can be very worrisome. You already did all the hard work and you don't want your KDA to be affected because while defusing the spike, you don't know what the sounds mean. In this section, we'll be covering all the sounds you need to know when it comes to the spike in Valorant. The first 2 sounds you can hear from the spike are the planting and defusing sounds. Both of these sounds can be heard from one whole step circle away. This is 60 meters. However, once the spike is fully planted, a voice line will come on and tell you that the spike has been planted. Once the spike has officially been planted, the defending team has 45 seconds to defuse. Like what happened in the situation earlier, the spike will give you information based on how much time there is left to defuse. Right after the spike has been planted, the spike will beep at a rate of 1 beep per second. After 25 seconds, the spike beep will turn into 2 beeps per second. This is when you need to start thinking about hitting the defuse. Once you have 10 seconds left, the spike will start to beep at a rate of 4 beeps per second. Then finally, once there are only 5 seconds left, the spike will start beeping at a rate of 8 beeps per second. It takes 7 seconds to defuse the spike, so once you hear the 4 beeps per second, it's time to either start defusing or run away if you don't have enough time. A cool tip to know is that if the spike is already defused halfway and the player tries to defuse it again, the defuse sound is a higher pitch than it would be if it wasn't halfway defused. Knowing these sounds will help turn the beginner players of Valorant into more advanced players because now they can play slower and more methodical to hopefully win more rounds. One of the biggest parts about sound in Valorant is listening for when abilities are used. These sounds can be heard from various distances, so it's something that you definitely want to know. Luckily, in the most recent patch for Valorant, a circle was added on the minimap for all ability sounds. This circle will tell you the range at which the ability sounds can be heard. Even though you can look up to your minimap, it's still a great idea to know the distances because the minimap circle can sometimes be inaccurate. So starting out with the basics, whenever an agent uses an ultimate, their voice line will be heard all over the map. You're able to tell whose voice it is and then react accordingly. Now moving on to the normal abilities. So with the addition of the new sound circle for abilities, the agents Breach, Brimstone, Phoenix, Raze, and Viper all follow the same circle size as the FOOTSTEP circle. All the rest of the agents have different distances that aren't as simple as the FOOTSTEP circle. One thing to keep in mind with all abilities is that the other team will not be able to hear abilities being pulled out. They only hear sounds when you perform the actual ability. Now before we move on, you need to understand that if an agent throws an object for their ability, a new circle will be drawn around the projectile or object, and this is the distance where it can be heard. This is not the same as the agent's footstep circle. The first agent we need to talk about is Cypher. He has all the technology that you can throw down that can make sounds to opposing players unlike any other utility in the game. So starting out with the most tricky ability, we have the trap wire. This is a wire that can be thrown down that will disappear after Cypher throws it. Players inside the circle from it can hear it when it's placed, but it won't make another sound and show up unless the player gets within 3 meters. The next ability that Cypher has is his cyber cage. This ability is normal and will make sound once it lands on the ground, and it can be heard a footstep circle away. If you decide to walk into the cyber cage while it's active, it will make a sound that will alert the other team. However, there's no sound if this is your team's cyber cage.
Triggered.
Cypher's final ability can be a bit confusing for newer players, but essentially, Cypher will throw down his camera and a new circle will be drawn on the minimap. Once Cypher is in the camera, he will be able to hear any sounds that are made within the circle. On the other hand, other players will be able to hear Cypher activate his camera if they are located in this same circle. Moving on to our next agent, we're going to be talking about Jet. Jet is unique in the fact that she has a passive ability that allows her to float in air. This ability won't cost her any credits, but instead she pays by making a ton of sound inside your footstep circle. Jet has another ability that is also footstep circle based, and this is her cloudburst. The circle is drawn from where the smoke lands. Jet has two other abilities, updraft and tailwind. Both of these abilities can be heard from 45 meters away, which is actually the furthest an ability can be heard from in Valorant. The next agent that has unique sound distances is Omen. Omen uses teleports that will allow you to tell where he teleports to if you're close enough to him. If you are close enough, you will hear an extra audio cue to tell you where Omen is. This is what it's going to sound like. This is the same with Omen's ultimate ability. We found that you're able to hear the extra audio cue whenever you're no more than 25 meters away from the new teleport spot. This next agent is very unique due to her healing ability. This agent is Sage. An enemy player will be able to hear Sage's heal whenever they are closer than 20 meters away from the player being healed. But if Sage decides to heal herself, we found that you can only hear the audio if you are around no more than 12 meters away. Sage's ultimate also makes an extra audio cue once she starts reviving. This audio cue will be able to be heard if a player is within 1.5 footstep circles from Sage. Now our next agent that has unique sound distances is Sova. Sova has arrows that allows him to gain control of the map. One of these arrows is able to be heard from 40 meters away, while the other one is from 30 meters away. Right now, the recon bolt is able to be heard from 40 meters away, whereas the shock bolt can only be heard from 30. And don't worry, those of you that like this satisfying sound of changing the amount of bounces each arrow has, this will not make sound to any opposing players. The rest of Sova's abilities are normal, but for the owl drone, it's similar to every other projectile as it makes sound inside its own footstep circle. Sova would have been our final agent before the official release of Valorant, but due to the new agent Reyna, we have even more ability sounds to discuss. Starting out, Reyna's Leer ability will be able to be heard from the colored circle that is formed on the minimap. Unlike any of the other agents, you will be informed whenever Reyna will use one of her other two abilities, Dismiss or Devour. This is because in order to activate them, she needs to secure at least one kill. The interesting thing about Reyna's Dismiss ability is that if it's combined with her ultimate, she will go completely invisible. Luckily, once she returns out of this invisible state, she will perform a crackling laugh that will give you an idea of where she's now located. When Reyna's ult and dismiss abilities are combined, it can be pretty overpowered, but if you can listen carefully, you'll be able to figure out where she is and get that kill. I know that this was a lot of information all at once, so feel free to take a step back and rewatch any section you might have forgotten. You definitely want to learn these distances, especially if you main the agent, because you don't want to be putting your team at a disadvantage by giving up your location and possibly other players' locations. Always remember that if you do happen to forget a distance, you can always look at the minimap to give you a pretty accurate sound circle that shows the sound range for all the abilities. That wraps it up for this Valorant sound guide. I hope this video helped you learn more about the sound in Valorant. If it did, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more high quality Valorant guides. Also, be sure to tell us in the comments what your favorite tip was. Thank you so much for watching all the way through this guide, and we'll see you in the next one.